Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Speaker Pro Tem Lori Pohutsky, and I represent the 17th House District, which includes parts of Livonia, Redford Township, and Detroit. In 2020, Governor Gretchen Whitmer issued an executive directive to the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy to develop the My Healthy Climate Plan. We already knew that extreme weather was negatively affecting Michiganders' lives and livelihoods more frequently, but that would become even more apparent in subsequent years. The summer of 2021 saw massive rainfall across much of Michigan, with Metro Detroit being hit particularly hard. More than 1 million people lost power. Roads were impassable. Homes and businesses were flooded. Last year, Eagle released the details of the plan, which positioned Michigan as a national leader in decarbonizing our electric grid and our economy. But again, the environment reminded us of how urgent the situation actually is. Ice storms earlier this year left hundreds of thousands of Michiganders without power, some for a week or more. Wildfires in Canada and right here in Michigan blanketed much of the northern half of the country with smoke, drastically affecting air quality. And as many in this room know, it is often already marginalized communities that bear the brunt of greenhouse gas-driven problems. The My Healthy Climate Plan is an excellent framework. As legislators, it's our duty to put it into action, and that's why we're here today. My colleagues and I are introducing a 3-bill package to enact crucial parts into law. And while we're focused today on those 3 bills, there are so many incredible environmental leaders working on other bills as well to make our state cleaner and safer for generations to come. I'm going to let Floor Leader Aiyash and Representative Coffia speak to the details of their bills. But my bills provides the tools necessary to achieve several of the goals of the My Healthy Climate Plan: mitigating the effects of extreme weather, addressing environmental injustice, and making green energy available and affordable. Specifically, it allows the Michigan Public Service Commission, which regulates our state's utilities, to consider these factors in its decision-making and require utilities to act on them. It also requires the MPSC to listen to the concerns of communities most impacted by environmental factors, and it gives those communities more opportunities to influence the Commission's decisions. One of our primary responsibilities as lawmakers is the health of our constituents, and a healthy climate means a healthier Michigan. I'm now going to turn things over to Floor Leader Aiyash.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Pro Tem Pohutsky. I'm Abraham Aiyash, State Representative for the 9th House District, which includes the city of Hamtramck and significant portions of Detroit. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues today from across the state and with partners from our environmental community to continue the important work of tackling the climate crisis and to make sure that we're proposing common sense solutions to provide clean, affordable energy to all Michiganders. Since I first came into the House in 2020, one of the most important issues that my constituents talk about consistently is the need to provide for affordable energy and having a reliable grid while also not polluting our air and our water. My constituents in Detroit and Hamtramck pay remarkably high rates for remarkably unreliable energy. They often also lack lots of resources that are necessary that would help them afford their utility bills. And in areas in my district, we have some of the most polluted communities in the entire state of Michigan. And after decades of exposure of toxic pollution from power plants and incinerators, one that we just saw finally come down on Sunday, folks in my community continue to face significant health risks because of poor air quality from fossil fuel emissions, hazardous waste facilities like U.S. Ecology or now Republic Services, and factories that emit really bad odor that's causing air violations like the Stellantis Mack plant. This has to change. While decarbonizing our energy grid is a critical goal, and one I am proud to fully support, we also got to remember that the cheapest energy is not the energy we don't consume in the first place. So one of the ways that we get to a carbon neutral energy sector is that we got to make sure that we're making energy efficiency improvements, and that means less consumption of fossil fuels. And that over time will help improve the health of communities like mine. My bill in this package has 3 main components. The first is an update to and expansion of Michigan's energy waste reduction standard. Electric and natural gas service providers have been meeting the standards of 1.5% and 1% of annual savings, respectively, for many years, and they've done it by a comfortable margin. This legislation would set a goal of 2.25% for electric providers and 1.75% for natural gas providers to encourage further savings for residents and businesses. The second component is an update to energy efficiency plan timelines. This will allow utilities more time to implement and assess their plans so that we are going through a just transition. Finally, this bill would require more focus on low-income communities and communities of color, bringing more environmental justice in areas of the state like mine who desperately need it. Electric providers and natural gas providers will be required to spend at least 25% and 35% respectively on energy efficiency programs for low-income households. Again, an emphasis on ensuring we have a just transition. Providers can spend more time, if it is necessary, to address underserved communities and those who suffer the high burden of energy costs. And to be clear, it's not just places like Detroit. Places like UP pay some of the highest rates in the country. Utilities would be required to reduce barriers to participation in energy efficiency programs, and it would allow multiple methods of qualifications. They'd be required to coordinate with other programs and providers of assistance of low-income households to maximize the benefits that these customers receive. Like in my community, it would be Wayne Metro. Finally, service providers would be required to grow their workforce of energy efficiency employees and contractors, specifically focusing on hiring low-income and environmental justice communities. These changes will increase efficiency, affordability, and accessibility for Michigan's utility customers, while also ensuring that we are creating good-paying jobs across the state as we move to a cleaner and more just Michigan. This will improve the health outcomes for vulnerable and underserved communities, and we will continue to grow Michigan's green energy job sector. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague from Traverse City, Representative Betsy Coffia.
Thank you, Floor Leader Aiyash. Good morning, everyone. So I'm proud to be here today and proud to be a part of this package. As was said, my name is Betsy Coffia. I serve the 103rd District, which serves parts of Benzie, Grand Traverse, and Leelanau counties. And I would be remiss if I did not shout out the fact that my district is literally the home, the birthplace of a revered environmental champion, set of champions, Bill and Helen Milliken. Former Governor Bill Milliken, a Republican governor who is looked up to across the aisle and across time for his courage in advancing environmental priorities. We know that the cornerstone of the My Healthy Climate Plan is increasing the use of renewable energy to limit greenhouse gas emissions. Michigan's renewable energy law currently, which sets the standard for how much energy a utility must generate from renewable sources, was last updated in 2016. It set a goal at that time of 15% renewable energy by 2021. We are approaching a decade since that change, and while 15% may have been an appropriate, if modest, goal at the time, times have changed. Our situation has changed with climate, and unfortunately it has worsened. We need to join half of the states in the country, including Minnesota and Illinois, in actually codifying and taking bold steps to decarbonize our electric grid with setting these standards. The My Healthy Climate Plan outlined those steps, but as I just mentioned, our state laws have not kept up, and my bill will change that. My bill maintains the standard of 15% through the year 2026. Then it increases the standard to 40% for 2027 through 2029. And for 2030 and beyond, the standard is then 60%. To be clear, just setting the renewable energy targets isn't enough. The ultimate goal is a carbon-free energy grid. This bill sets the year 2035 as the target for 100% carbon-free energy. Pro Tem Pohutsky mentioned earlier just a few of the recent incidents of extreme weather that devastated communities across the state. Representative Floor Leader Aiyash laid out the health impacts that carbon-based energy generation has on our communities, as well as high utility rates in places like Northern Michigan and especially the UP. And while people may rightly associate Northern Michigan, my home area, with fresh air and a beautiful, clean environment, we feel so strongly in the North that we need to act now to keep it that way. So much of our way of life up north depends on a healthy and clean environment, not least of which our critical tourism economy. The last thing I want to mention about my bill is that within the 60% renewable standard, there must be a portion that comes from distributed generation projects. And a significant portion of those projects, as was mentioned, must serve low-income customers. Community and rooftop solar projects are not just for the wealthy. Everyone should have access to local small to medium scale renewable energy projects. And to talk more about that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Representative Rachel Hood.
Thank you, Rep. Coffia. My name is Rachel Hood. I serve as the representative for the 81st House District in Northeast Grand Rapids, and Ada townships. I've spent decades of my career working for climate solutions, environmental and public health protections. I want to thank the sponsors for including the community solar bills today. As Rep. Coffia mentioned, part of our plan is to reach our renewable energy goals requires distributed energy and community scale solar projects. Community solar offers a number of important advantages to customers and utilities alike. It allows individual households or groups of communities and business partners to work together to access clean, accessible, renewable energy. Utilities can purchase extra energy generated by these projects, and that energy will count towards their renewable portfolio. Ratepayers will enjoy the savings and the buybacks that this provides. The workforce will grow, and the number of businesses leading on solar initiatives will grow in the state of Michigan. And ratepayers will enjoy the savings and buybacks that community solar provides. It increases access to affordable, clean energy, and it makes the grid more resilient. That's why I'm proud to have reintroduced the community solar legislation this term with a bipartisan team, including Representative John Roth from Interlochen. As the previous speakers have mentioned, now is the time to act on these projects. Actually, it was yesterday, but moving forward is critical, and this is truly a pivotal moment in our state's future as it relates to energy management. Thanks to an influx of funding from the federal government that can now go towards clean energy and green infrastructure, we have a unique opportunity to build out solar at very little cost to the state. Community solar and distributed generation have a key role to play in helping Michigan to achieve a carbon-free energy grid. Thank you again for allowing me to be here and part of this press conference today. I'd like to introduce our colleague from the Natural Resources Defense Council, Derrell Slaughter.
Thank you, Representative Hood. Again, my name is Derrell Slaughter. I serve as the Michigan Climate and Clean Energy Advocate for the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC. When I first got into the clean energy space a little over a decade ago, when I was first getting started in my career, we knew that climate change was the #1 challenge that we're going to be faced with. And in order to tackle that threat, we need to make a significant transition from our fossil-based generation to using more renewables. Since that time, we've seen that transition happen much quicker than I think a lot of us actually expected. To point to some examples, just locally, our local utility, Lansing Board of Water and Light, just over a decade ago was burning about 1.2 million tons of coal. Now it's burning absolutely 0 tons. Consumers Energy has announced that they're going to be retiring their remaining coal plant, the Campbell coal plant, in 2025. This transition is possible and it's happening. But in order to do that, Michigan needs to move faster and also take advantage of many of the investments that we're seeing, historic investments that we're seeing at the federal level. Between proposed rules through the EPA, through power plant rules, and the clean energy incentives that are part of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to see the transition of clean energy accelerate. But we need new energy policy here in the state. We blew past the 15% renewable energy standard years ago. The utilities have been meeting the current energy waste reduction standard and can do more. And the Public Service Commission, the regulators for the utilities, are operating on a statute that was created in the 1930s. As a former Michigan Public Service Commission staffer, I understand the limitations of that statute and how they can kind of handcuff our colleagues there at the commission to be able to do more there. This bill package is a win-win-win in terms of getting us to where we need to go, to have Michigan's energy policy point us and bring us into this decade or into this century and even beyond. The days of having to invest in or importing fossil fuels to provide energy for folks should be the days of the past. Should be investing more in wind, solar energy storage systems, as they lead to a path of creating more self-sufficiency and lower the cost for all Michiganders. But these investments will ultimately lead to positive results for the folks who have faced the burden of the pollution that's come from fossil fuels, particularly black and brown folks in Michigan who have felt the effects from there. By benefiting from a cleaner air quality, and the residual economy effects will be good for all. But I'm so happy, but without legislative action, we can't get any of this accomplished. And that's why I'm so grateful for the representatives here and House Energy Chair Helena Scott and Speaker Tate for prioritizing this issue there. So really grateful and happy to be here. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Nick Occhipinti for Michigan LCV.
Thank you, Derrell. Good morning. My name is Nick Occhipinti, and I'm the Government Affairs Director at the Michigan League of Conservation Voters. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to be here today. This is just an exceptional moment. We have a moment like never before in Michigan to invest in our people, to protect our air and water, and to create clean energy jobs and lead the fight on tackling climate change, one of the great challenges of our time. Taking action on climate change truly is a kitchen table issue. It means upgrades across the state, especially in low-income communities, improvements that will lower costs, put money back in people's pockets, and reduce energy waste. We can create good-paying jobs that don't require a college degree while protecting our health and securing our future. For all of us, regardless of income or zip code. How do we do this? We have an opportunity to weatherize homes with energy efficiency to make them healthier and more comfortable while cleaning up our air. We have an opportunity to fuel the clean energy workforce of the future, putting thousands of Michiganders to work, building and renovating affordable housing, expanding renewable energy, modernizing our grid, supporting farmers and local communities by transforming our energy usage. We also have an opportunity to center Michigan as a hub for clean manufacturing and electric vehicles that will be fueled by clean energy. We have the opportunity now to clean up our air and our water, to protect our health, and ensure a livable future for our kids and grandkids, and to improve the quality of life for all Michiganders. You know, many Michigan families are now struggling with budgets that reflect the costs of global inflation, higher prescription drugs, frequent doctor's visits to manage their kids' asthma. This is an opportunity to improve the health outcomes and drive down their costs. Michiganders across the state are demanding action on climate change, and our leaders, like those standing here today, are taking action. I want to commend Speaker Pro Tem Pohutsky, Floor Leader Aiyash, Representatives Hoods and Coffia, and all of their many colleagues supporting this package for Michigan's transition to a clean energy future. We call on lawmakers in the House to pass legislation to achieve 100% clean energy by 2035, enact policies that weatherize our homes and buildings to reduce energy usage and air pollution to save Michiganders money, and of course to empower the Michigan Public Service Commission to hold utilities accountable for their high rates and poor service. Together, we can achieve a cleaner, more healthy Michigan while bolstering our economy, creating high-quality, meaningful jobs for now and generations to come. Thank you, and I'm sure we'll have a moment to take questions here.
Anyone have any questions?
Yes, this is Dave Eggert at Cranes. I wonder if somebody could explain the 2035 target. Is that optional? Is it a requirement? And is it different from a renewable portfolio standard, or usually nuclear power and things like that?
Does anybody else want to handle any of that?
Yeah, I can start.
Great.
Nick Occhipinti, Michigan LCV. The 2035 standard is modeled after the federal government, President Joe Biden standard. There are two separate standards in this bill. One is the renewable energy standard, which is the 60% by 2035, and then 100% is carbon-free. It's broader, and that's a standard that does currently include things like nuclear and other forms of energy. So two standards here, one that's tighter, and then one that's broader that allows different types of energy sources into the legislation.
Lake Winnie, Michigan Advance, are we anticipating any bipartisan support on this package, any sort of collaboration with Republicans?
So as Representative Hood pointed out, there is bipartisan support, not just in the form of co-sponsorship or just general support, but in the form of sponsoring one of the community solar bills. Representative Roth is a sponsor on one of those. And in terms of the bills that we're talking about today, there were Republicans that we had conversations with who were interested that did not sign on as co-sponsors at that point in time. I'm going to be honest, I'm not terribly, co-sponsorships do not concern me as much as general conversations that we're having and overall support. And we've seen from the work that Representative Hood has done and the conversations that we've had around this package, because this package has been several months in the making. So thank you to all of our environmental partners for getting us to this point. We have brought some folks on the other side of the aisle into the fold, and they are supportive.
We have a question from the live stream here. This is from Arpan Lobo with the Free Press. She said, Representative Aiyash mentioned his bill would require service providers to grow their workforce in low-income communities. For clarification, does this refer to hiring more folks from those communities or grow their staff to serve those communities?
Hiring folks from those communities. As we talk about the opportunities that'll come with moving to a renewable energy portfolio and investing in things like solar and wind, and in some cases nuclear, it's going to require folks to be hired. So as we are moving other parts of the state towards that, we want to make sure that those like folks who live in places like Detroit and Benton Harbor are not the last to get some of those benefits of clean energy. So the intent would be to hire from those communities to actually move us towards that clean energy standard.
Jenny?
Yeah, Danielle James with MERS. I'm curious, it seems like some of these standards are expanding on the Healthy Michigan plan. And I'm curious, what sort of budgetary investments you're looking at to kind of start moving get this ball rolling.
I mean, obviously the budget is on the top of everyone's mind. So as I said, these are bills that we've been working on for some time. These are bills that we've had conversations with in all of the various areas they reach into. So we have had conversations with the appropriations side of things just to make sure that we're in a position to actually implement this and get the state on the right track and furthering it. So those conversations are taking place, and as someone who does not serve on appropriations, blessedly, I don't know the exact details of how far we're going in those conversations, but I do know that we have had those conversations breaching policy into the appropriations because it is going to take some investment. So.
I'll add to that as the chair of Eagle Appropes. We first, as I mentioned in my comments, we see a significant amount of funding just in front of us. It won't be included in this budget, but hundreds of millions of dollars are coming from the IRA, from federal resource packages that are looking at infrastructure and advancing the clean energy economy across the country. Those will be applied here in multiple places. In addition to that, we do have resources in the general fund, and then with additional federal funding placed in this year's Eagle budget, we're negotiating to finalize those in the next 48 hours roughly, and we'll hopefully see those in committee and moving forward to the floor in the next 2 weeks as we finalize the budget before July 1st, knock on wood. Yeah. Thank you.
Got another question from the live stream. Sherry McWhirter from MLive. Only Rhode Island has a goal to reach 100% carbon-free electricity faster. There was just by 2033. Then the goal Rep. Coffia mentioned. Why do you believe Michigan can meet that 100% carbon-free power goal faster than every other state already committed to that finish line?
I'm happy for other people to weigh in on this too, but I think that we've seen we have no other option. You know, we outlined the costs in multiple ways to the state, be it health, be it the fact that we had people who didn't have power during an ice storm for 11 days this year. Yes, this is bold, but we're in dire times, so I think that it calls for a bold, aggressive set of plans to try and combat that. And if anyone else would like to weigh in on that, would be great.
Yeah, I'll just add, our former governor is the Secretary of Energy. So if I had to guess, I still think she loves the state of Michigan. And as you talk about the investments coming from IJA and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Investments in Jobs Act, Infrastructure and Investment in Jobs Act, we have an opportunity to tap into those resources. And the people in Michigan last November elected a common sense climate majority that is going to emphasize building on an economy that'll create jobs, and we have more clean energy and green sector jobs than anywhere else in the country. We're the fastest growing, rather. And that's a testament to the investments that we are going to make and that we're going to continue to make. So this idea that, is it far-fetched? To Pro Tem Pohutsky's point, you can't, who would have thought that you would have had 100-year floods in a matter of 2 months back to back, right? Or ice storms that left people without power for almost 2 weeks. So those things also were unpredictable and no one thought would happen, but they did. And that requires us to also reimagine what's possible so we can meet the moment, and it requires this level of intensity. And quite frankly, it's a real opportunity for us to build a strong, robust economy for decades to come. We're not talking about one-off jobs, but establish careers for folks that can finally look at ways, as we come out of this pandemic, to build strong-paying jobs for their communities and also protecting the planet. It's a win-win. Money in the pockets and a cleaner planet.
I'll go ahead and add. So, as has already been well stated, not only this is intended to actually reduce rates for consumers, bring down costs for the kitchen table, bring more long-term clean energy jobs, but if I may, I'm pretty sure the people of Michigan elected us to lead, not to follow. And it is our responsibility to be leaders in this area of climate and energy. I'll just add that.
To what extent were utilities consulted on this or helped to craft it at all?
Utilities been brought in throughout the process. You know, I mean, this was no surprise to anyone. They had the drafts before we introduced them. Nobody wants anyone surprised. We need everybody on board, and we need everyone to come along with us for this to be effective and for it to work. So I'm not saying that utilities are as excited as we all are today, but I am saying that nobody wanted any of this to be a surprise. They had drafts before anything was introduced, and we plan on working with them more as the legislative process unfolds with these. They are necessary for us to be able to enact this, so we want to make sure that everybody is copacetic as possible.
Dan Arbor. You say that you want to create opportunities for communities to tell the MPSC what they're concerned about, and that the Service Commission needs to listen to their concerns, or is required to listen to their concerns. Does that look like the Service Commission is enacting what they're hearing about, or that they have to have these listening sessions?
So currently the Public Service Commission isn't required to have public hearings on much of anything, and in some cases, particularly around rate increases, it's been a struggle to get those meetings to have, or for those public hearings to even occur. So this would require under a number of different scenarios, anything that qualifies as substantial public interest. So that might include rate increases, integrated resource plans, dealing with, changing investments and things like that. So there's a number of things that are outlined in the bill, and that would require 2 public hearings so that people can make their voices heard. What I can say as someone who has attended some of those public hearings, they're very, very important, because I am not entirely sure, and this is not a slight to the Michigan Public Service Commission. They have been very helpful throughout these outages in a one-on-one sense. And they've made themselves available for us so that we can communicate some of the issues that our constituents are having. But to have those scenarios and those situations where people can come in and talk about what it looks like when they have to take their loved one to a hotel because they rely on an oxygen machine that doesn't run when there's no electricity. Or a nursing mother of newborn twins in my district who had to shuffle breast milk to someone else's home because she was worried it was all going to go bad because her freezer was out of power because she had been out of power for several days. I think having the ability to tell the commission those stories one-on-one is impactful, and it's necessary, and frankly, I think it's part of their duty to hear the reality of what energy looks like in this state. So the bill itself outlines the different scenarios where those public hearings would be required, but that's the thrust of them.